If you're a subscriber to this channel, you know one of the biggest mysteries we've discussed in the past is how Boeing executives have escaped criminal charges as the result of the two Boeing Max jet crashes. Well, now it looks like justice may finally get its first real chance to be served against all those involved in the Boeing Max conspiracy, as breaking news this weekend revealed that Texas U.S. District Judge Rita O'Connor rejected arguments by the U.S. Justice Department and Boeing that the families of those killed in the crashes should not be considered crime victims. But in a huge blow to the DOJ and Boeing, Judge O'Connor found in favor of victims' families that the 346 people killed in the crashes are indeed crime victims under federal law. However, O'Connor hasn't ruled on what the government must do to remedy its violation of the family's rights. There's no way to overstate what a huge win this is for the victims' families, and what potential damage this decision could mean for the future of the Boeing company. That's next on Maximus. Greetings everybody, Maximus here. So before we get into the breaking landmark decision by U.S. District Judge Rita O'Connor, let's recap how this decision came about. Back in May of this year, the families of the victims of the two Boeing 737 MAX crashes asked the Texas judge to overturn a 2021 $2.5 billion settlement between Boeing and the U.S. government. Under that agreement, Boeing admitted to having committed fraud in exchange for the DOJ dropping some other charges against Boeing over the deadly crashes which killed 346 people. It was this January 7, 2021 arrangement that was the focus of the May 2022 court hearing in Fort Worth, Texas. At the May hearing before Judge O'Connor, Catherine Berthet, a French woman who lost her 28-year-old daughter in the 2019 Ethiopian crash, said, "They messed up by making the crime fraud rather than manslaughter. We believe that the rights of the victims' families have not been respected," she said. "We have not been consulted," and she told the judge that we asked to be heard. So what exactly happened between Boeing and the U.S. Justice Department when they signed that sweetheart deal? For that, let's go to the Corporate Crime Reporter, where they explained it excellently. In January of 2021, when the Justice Department brought its criminal case against Boeing in connection with the two MAX crashes that killed 346 people, federal prosecutors brought the case in federal court in Fort Worth, Texas. But why? Fort Worth, Texas has no connection to Boeing or the victims. The case was brought by the then U.S. Attorney in Northern District of Texas, Erin Neely Cox. Now you need to remember that name. Some of you may remember I did a video on her, but just remember the name Erin Neely Cox. Cox and Boeing settled that case with a deferred prosecution agreement, an agreement that Columbia Law professor John Coffey at the time called one of the worst deferred prosecution agreements he had ever seen. Boeing did not have to plead guilty to any of the allegations, and no Boeing executive was charged. Also, the Boeing Deferred Prosecution Agreement included an unusual provision finding that a compliance monitor was not necessary because the misconduct was neither pervasive across the organization, nor undertaken by a large number of employees, nor facilitated by senior mismanagement. But how did Cox and the federal prosecutors know that, he said? They never questioned the senior management. That's without precedent, Coffey said back in 2021. Coffey said, "I've not seen anywhere else, and I've looked at a number of deferred prosecution agreements. Prosecutors themselves are not conducting the investigation." Boeing's lead corporate criminal defense law firm is Kirkland & Ellis. Now this is why I told you to remember the name Erin Neely Cox. Because right after the historic Boeing case was settled with a sweetheart deal, Cox, the lead prosecutor in the Boeing case, left the Justice Department earlier that year and joined Kirkland & Ellis as a partner in its Dallas office. Yes, the very same Kirkland & Ellis with who she negotiated that sweetheart deal. In response to the Kirkland & Ellis hiring of Cox, law professor Coffey said, "There never seemed to be an adequate or even plausible reason for why this case was brought in Texas when Boeing had no connection whatsoever with that state. But now that the U.S. attorneys joined the defense counsel's law firm, That suggested that they were both on the same wavelength about finding a quick and gentle resolution of the case that did not embarrass or injure Boeing. At the time, Coffey said, "I cannot say this was unlawful or even unethical on the available evidence, but this is not how an adversarial system of justice normally works or should work." He said this is a very friendly system of criminal justice for large corporations. Well, Professor Coffey, allow me to say what you couldn't bring yourself to say. I believe it's called collusion. So now that brings us back to today's landmark decision by the U.S. District Judge Reed O'Connor. In his Friday, October 22nd decision, O'Connor said that the Justice Department violated the rights of passengers killed on Boeing 737 Max planes when the federal government reached a deferred prosecution deal with the company in 2021. O'Connor said the evidence was clear that Boeing's admitted conspiracy led to the deaths of hundreds of people. The court finds that the tragic loss of life that resulted from the two airplane crashes was a reasonably foreseeable consequence of Boeing's conspiracy to defraud the United States. Well, finally, somebody said it. Paul Castle, a University of Utah law professor and former federal judge who is representing the victims' families, said the Justice Department had engaged in a major, deliberate, and orchestrated violation of law that requires that crime victims be involved in crafting these kinds of arrangements. He added the government and Boeing both had multiple lawyers working on this secret deal, and now the judge has made clear that secrecy was a gross violation of federal law. Naoise Connolly Ryan, whose husband Mick was killed in the Ethiopian crash, said in a statement that some family members said that they are seeking prosecution for Boeing and its executives. Families like mine are the true victims of Boeing's criminal misconduct, and our views should have been considered before the government gave them a sweetheart deal. Michael Stumo, whose daughter Samaya was killed in the crash outside Ethiopia's capital Addis Ababa, said, "Boeing captured the FAA to get the deadly Max 8 certified. They captured the Department of Justice under President Trump, and they captured the Department of Justice under President Biden to deny crash families rights to participate in the criminal investigation and prosecution. And they thought they would capture a federal judge in Fort Worth, Texas, too," he added. And Stumo concluded that Attorney General Merrick Garland should order a new investigative team to redo the entire criminal inquiry against Boeing. Well, I for one applaud Judge Reed O'Connor, because I thought he'd probably do what most judges do and just go along with the Department of Justice. But I'm glad I was wrong. And while this is potentially great news for the victims' families, and it opens the door to a real chance for justice to be finally meted out to Boeing, there is still a long line of bureaucratic hands that this case will have to go through until we will actually see Boeing facing real criminal charges in a court of law. But at least this is as close as we've come in a long time, so it does look like there is some hope on the horizon for these families. Well, that's all I have for now. I was in the middle of a few other videos when this story broke, but I wanted to get it out to you pretty quick. But don't worry, those other videos are still on the way, so keep a lookout for them. And as always, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, so be sure to let me know down below. And if you think I've earned it, I would appreciate you subscribing. And also don't forget to like, share, and ring the bell. And remember, leave the rubber on the runway and your troubles on the ground. And I will see you next time. In the air. Yeah, this is Maximus.